the guy coming out the woods, I think someone needs to flip the camera around and say, this is where the guy came from. This is who picked him up. And this is where they were going.
I know you mentioned that to me, but I wasn't thinking to avoid the death penalty. And that's happened so many times in real cases. Fingerprints or your favorite DNA.
You want to come play with my cat?
Once you identify these people, you could then look at that blood that was on the railing in the house, the knife sheath, the mattress, the door handles, and compare their DNA. You could look for connections and start asking people, like by the house, how there's that wooded area behind the house. I'm thinking of something like that. Yeah. Don't make fun of me.
I'm not. You just said from the woods, and I'm like, why is there a camera on a tree in the wood?
But it's okay to use that logic with Bryan. Because he pinged off the tower.
I will take all of that sarcasm and let it drape over me.
As always, everything we discuss is for entertainment and is speculation. Please like and subscribe, and definitely join our discussion in the comments. If you're ready, let's get into it. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello. And today we're going to talk about alternative suspects. Serendipitously, some new documents dropped, so I know that you are going to read those, alone.
Episodes will be coming out for, I know two of them that stood out to me it's the judge's orders pertaining to the 911 call and the text messages and what will be allowed at court. And the other one was about the expert witnesses. So those were the two. I know there are others, and there's some new information in those that we didn't know before. So
right.
They're very interesting.
Yeah. And today's topic is the alternate suspects. And this is a little bit out of my league, because I am a guilter. I'm open-minded. I want to hear what some of those are. I've heard a few, so I definitely have some opinions on those.
Well, I should back up because one of the other, this comes from our list of we had eight hot topics that come from the motions in limine. These are the things that either the defense or the prosecution are bringing to the table to say, we don't think they should be allowed, or we have, arguments against these things. We want the judge's ruling on them. And the defense has come to the table and said, we are going to state that we believe that there are alternative suspects that should have been looked into because Bryan Kohberger is not the perpetrator.
Right. And I think before we get started, we should recognize the community a little bit. They've stepped up.
You guys showed out.
We've done a couple premieres, and we've been able to, be in the chat while those are going on. I think there's been some great discussion in the chat as the episode's been going on. So we expect the same on this one. So hopefully we will be there as this is playing, and we can engage with everybody. And also subscribers have gone up. We're less than 200 away from our goal of 1,000.
Yes, we're trying to get to that 1,000 mark, and we had a big boost with our last couple. We do the premiere lives because we're not at the live point yet. We've done a couple, but I do love being able to engage while the video's playing. We all watch it together and talk about it as we go. So that's been great.
I think one of the typically unique things that I think we have, which kind of limits our engagement with the audience, is that we're engaged with each other throughout the podcast. So for us to kind of look at the chat and disengage from our conversation to have a conversation on chat, it's almost easier if we continue to engage with each other. And then as it premieres, then we can engage with the audience, a little bit better. So I think there's some individual podcasters who their only engagement is the screen or the microphone, and they can engage online at the same time. But we're trying to have a conversation. And if you're looking elsewhere and I'm trying to, hey, did you hear that? You're like, well,
no, I was reading the chat.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a little bit unique for us is that we're trying to engage with each other. So that's typically why we, do it this way, but that may change in the future. Maybe we can, kind of slide into doing it live and engaging with the audience at the same time.
But if you have subscribed, we greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't, we hope you will join us and hit that button too. And we're going to start off with, we thought before we get into who we might think these alternative suspects are going to be, what would you need to see for someone to be considered a suspect, just overall?
So my answer is going to be short, but maybe I'll get some ideas from you. So I'm going to turn that question right back onto you and say, what do you think you would want to see to that someone would be considered a suspect in a case like that?
I have a list.
That's why my answer would be short and boring. Yours would be long and informative.
Well, motive number one, being able to at least hypothesize why you would think someone would commit a crime. And then video evidence, if that exists, of the person, having the weapon connected to the person. Do you want me to just keep rattling them off?
Yeah, maybe we'll come back and we'll talk about each of those afterwards.
Fingerprints or your favorite DNA. But also other things like hairs or fibers, either left at the scene or from the victims connected to the perpetrator. So some kind of evidence from the victims with the perpetrator. Eyewitnesses or witnesses that saw things. Maybe evidence of communication between.
That's what I was thinking.
To get that connection. Like, what's that connection between
what's the
perpetrator?
relationship?
Yes, relationship. Those are the things I could think of as I put this together. We could also relate it to how what are we seeing in this case?
Yeah. Well, I mean, starting back at the top of the list, there are many different ways someone would want to commit a crime. And those ways may not include some of the things that you listed there, like a motive. First thing that comes to mind to me is a serial killer. Their motivation isn't, external to the person. It's maybe internal to themselves. So there is kind of a motive, but it is not connected to the victim as much as
Still a motive.
Still a motive, right? And I guess there's some of that, I believe, in this case, which is difficult, I think, because we as a society, we want it to be clean. Everything on your list is 100% right on. I think as a juror, I want to sit there. I want motive. I want fibers. I want DNA. I want the murder weapon with the perpetrator's fingerprints on it. I want all those things to make it clear and simple. And this case isn't that. I'll give you that this case is not that. It's very fragmented. I think where there are areas of strong evidence, in my opinion, I think it could be disproven in some ways, with a good attorney. So yeah, I think for me personally, what do I want to see as, what would I expect to see as a juror? I want to put myself in that jury box.
Sure.
What I expect to see is, I think, all the things that you listed. However, I know criminals and crimes are more advanced. The detection of that is more advanced. So the criminals are getting smarter, in some cases. And I think this is one of them.
So let's go through this list and relate it to the current suspect that's going to trial. Motive. What are your thoughts?
So a little bit of what I was explaining earlier. I believe the motive is the internal demons in this person. Just like some previous serial killers who may or may not have had connections with people. I personally feel that this was something that was maybe intriguing and something that was deep inside him that had a fascination attached to it. And finally, he was in a position thousands of miles away from home, and his urge met his opportunity.
We say that quote a lot.
We do.
With that scenario. If there is going to be a motive in this case, if he is proven guilty, I think that's going to be the motive, because we haven't seen anything else. We haven't seen any other connection to the victims. So
yet.
And
they've been alluding
so there
to
could
it.
Be, I guess,
yeah.
another motive proven.
Yes.
As of now, everything we've seen, that would be the only motive right now that would make sense.
There has even been some recent speculation that there was some contact or some type of stalking, both on the computer and physical, although the laws of stalking are a little bit different.
It's different in that
state. So very difficult to put that on there. But knowing that the perpetrator knew a victim, at least, is some of the things that I've been hearing a little bit more.
Is that reference to the interview by the father?
A little bit before that, but
in there, or
yes,
was that from something else?
Yeah, it was mentioned in there.
Okay,
well. Yeah.
So we're talking about the Steve G interview that was released online. So, all right, so that's motive. Video of suspects, any kind of cameras in the area, anything captured on film. There is some in this case.
Well, but nothing of substance that shows. And you put an S on the end of that, so I'm going to take the S off and say that there was no video evidence of the suspect himself,
right,
on camera. They are trying to make connections through the car and other things.
Yes,
but
so they have a white car on camera, many different places that they're trying to prove is his. Say it's his.
Yeah.
The weapon, having a weapon.
So they don't have one. So
and there's debate about what it even is.
Right. So they don't have one. What they have is a holder or a sheath of a potential weapon, which would be weird if I brought a knife sheath and held my gun in it, while committing a crime. So I mean, this looks like, a 1 + 1 = 2, that if you see this weapon holster, you're going to make some assumptions, right?
Or how cunning would it be if that was not the weapon I used? Because we have not heard from the medical examiner yet of because they will speculate what weapon they believed made the wounds. Like, that's typical testimony from a medical examiner. Because if you remember in the Delphi case, that I think it was a medical examiner that finally said, "Oh, a box cutter," right? That he made that connection for what could have made those wounds. So we know that's coming, hopefully.
Sure.
But right now, we don't know if that's the case. So how cunning would that be if you're trying to throw things off and you leave a holder of one weapon, but you really used a different weapon? And I did put a picture on our community page of another type of weapon that could have been used. So you can check that out.
Sure.
Fingerprints. Like, let's talk about all the evidence. Fingerprints, hairs, fibers, DNA.
Well, let's exclude the DNA for a second, because there was one little piece on a button snap of a potentially planted or left behind, holder of a potential, or maybe not, murder weapon. So let's take all the other stuff. I love all the stuff that you described before, like fibers and transferring and I mean, this wasn't a, hey, I'm going to sneak into the house, turn on the gas and leave, or anything like that. This was hand-to-hand combat.
Yes.
Almost. There's physical touching going on, because apparently one of the victims was hit. So even with gloves, depending on what type of gloves that you had on, and there was a lot of talk that the perpetrator was in
all black.
Not just all black, but head to toe covered. So a lot of the physical matter
wouldn't get on.
Yeah. So
could get disposed of easily.
Exactly. So I get the fact that there's probably not any of that. And for the prosecution, it is almost good that that's how Dylan described the assailant.
For the prosecution, that's good, you said.
Because if she described a bushy-haired, white guy wearing a t-shirt and no gloves and shorts and running around, you would think that there would be shedding of body matter everywhere. The description of the assailant, whether it connects to this particular suspect or not, at least tells the prosecution, you aren't going to get some of this stuff, because they took extra special care in how they prepared to carry out this crime, in my opinion.
It could be another thing we will find out.
Exactly.
Because they did, with the suspect right now, Bryan Kohberger, they did take items from his apartment and from his place of work, and they went through his car and took it all apart. And I don't think that came up with anything. So especially that car, when that was happening in real time back in the day, even the people that thought they have the right guy and the car is going to prove it, right? Everybody thought if you leave a crime scene of that magnitude and get in your car, you're going to have something. Even if you have protective gear on, you're going to have blood on it, and you're going to get in that car and it's going to be in there.
I think I heard very early on, I remember very early on, that people speculated that everything came off before he got in the car, because there's no way.
That would be the only way to not get something in your car.
Exactly. So everything just came off into some type of bag that was cinched up. And even if that bag is thrown in the trunk, very little, if anything, if it's all going to be contained in that bag, is going to leak out. And I think, again, premeditation, he thought about this.
So they said isolated targeted attack. That means a planned by somebody, planned attack. Connection to the victims.
Before I answer on this one, because I haven't seen anything, what's your thoughts?
They haven't proven any connection to the victims. There's some ideas of places where it could have happened. A couple of the girls worked at a vegan restaurant. He's vegan. He was at a college hangout party that was massive, so people could have been there. It doesn't necessarily mean it was a two-way connection. I'm speaking for your side now. Just that he encountered them could be, is what I'm saying. I don't think they have proven any of that. We haven't seen any evidence to show that. So I don't think that exists.
So I know some of the family has stated that they thought that there was some type of connection right when the name first came out, before everything on the internet was scrubbed off. they kind of got in there and they did some things, and they did some things with the friends or the
followers,
the victims' phones as well, and their accounts, checked out a lot of stuff there. So
I think they said they thought he liked one of their things or something, but if that could be proven, that would be easy to prove, to show that. I think maybe that's a misspeak with the timeline. Maybe it was after, because people were putting fake accounts out there like crazy.
For sure. And even before his name was dropped, the family had mentioned that they went back and looked when the name was dropped, before people could go out there and taint the internet with, trolling things that they had.
I haven't seen that in the court documents though. So
family, I'm referencing.
Right, but if they knew that, you would think, because that's, to me, something you would want in a court case, to convict somebody. Alibi, that's big in this case. Having an alibi or a lack of an alibi, right? So apparently it looks like this suspect doesn't have anybody that can vouch for his whereabouts. So he's either relying on technology for his whereabouts, or that's why we're talking about the alternate suspects, because that's another defense alibi strat. Well, not alibi, it's another defense strategy.
Yes, and I think Bryan Kohberger, does not have an alibi. And even if there is some technology that could assist him, I don't think it's foolproof.
So this is why they're having the big battle of the call detail. No, wait, that's the wrong one. AT&T timing data, because
advanced timing data.
The advanced timing data from AT&T, because the suspect, Bryan Kohberger, wants his expert to use that technology to show where he was and that he couldn't have been at the house at the time of the crime. So that's why it's such a big deal to get that information.
His phone wasn't at.
Right, but everybody, prosecution and defense, is pretty much saying where the phone is, he is.
Okay.
Or the car. Where the car is, he is.
That's different than the phone.
But it's two items that aren't him, not him himself. So, but yeah, to your point, because they don't have video of him that we know of walking into the house.
Right.
So the alibi is a big one. That's a big one in this case. And witnesses is another one, because the witness is being questioned a lot. The surviving roommate, what she saw, when she saw it, her story timeline that she initially said, we're finding out now, is different. So, what's reliable and what's not. Basically, it's seeing someone in black, a mask, but
as a juror, hopefully a very impartial one, I would look at her testimony alone and not convict. There's way too much. If that was the only piece of evidence, even if the body description and the so-called bushy eyebrows and all that matched in some way, I would not convict on just that. And according to, I think, the defense, she's even admitted, Dylan has admitted, look, I don't really know what's real, what's a dream, I was drunk, hallucinating or whatever, so I don't know that I would really. Now, as a small corner piece to the puzzle, yeah, I may put it there, because it doesn't exclude. Nowhere in her testimony that I'm aware of, or at least that the testimony that's been released, does she say, I saw two people.
No.
And nowhere in her testimony did she say, I saw a very short African-American man.
Right.
So those are the things that, again, it's a very small corner piece that doesn't really create the picture of the puzzle itself.
And I think the defense is probably going to attack that with the scenarios of those roommates' activities that night and how that fits in, and just make that a questionable fact or piece of evidence for sure.
So I want to hear some of these alternate suspects, but I want to put maybe some parentheses or a little bit of understanding around it before we get into it, so I can have a clear mind as you're telling me this. Do these alternate suspects include or do not include Bryan Kohberger's participation?
The names I wrote down do not include.
I would feel better if it did not include, because if Bryan Kohberger is part of a grander conspiracy or a patsy for a grander plan, then there's no communicating about that, right? You know, we have the guy, we just don't have the other guys or girls.
I wasn't thinking that way.
Okay.
That has been speculated by other people. Some people think, you know, he's totally guilty, did it by himself. Some people say, I think he was involved, but didn't do it alone. And some people say, I don't think he has the right guy.
Right.
So
we're on the they don't have the right guy.
If they don't have the right guy, who do we think the defense is going to point the finger at as the suspects that they're going to have to claim they have evidence for?
So I'm glad you clarified that, because I would think, and we've talked about this before, little sidebar here for a minute.
Sidebar. That's the Karen Reed case.
I told you that right close to when this trial starts, I have a feeling after all these motions are done.
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah. After all these motions are done and we do all the pre-trial, motions and hearings and all this stuff, once they figure out what the trial is going to look like, what's going to be allowed in, what's not going to be allowed in, he pleads before trial begins. It could even be up to a day before trial begins, and only to not get the death penalty. And if I think if he was involved in a greater conspiracy, he would have already been like, look, I don't want the death penalty. Maybe I played somewhat of a role in this. Let me give up everybody else. And, if you want to know the real truth of what happened that night, here it is. And I'm not going to be the patsy and the one that dies and everybody else lives a wonderful life for another 50 years.
I know you mentioned that to me, but I wasn't thinking to avoid the death penalty. And that's happened so many times in real cases, because if you're looking at, and trust me, I'm on the side where I don't think they have the right person. So that would be tragic to me to have to confess guilt to something that I've been proclaiming my innocence for. But if you're looking at the potential of they're going to find me guilty, they're going to find me guilty of something I didn't do. Would you rather, this is such a deep conversation. Would you say, you know what? I'm just going to say I did it. I'm going to live and be in prison, but then I could still fight. I
think it's called an Alfred plea.
Oh,
where you're not admitting guilt.
West Memphis 3.
Oh, okay.
Case.
I think it's the stairway case too.
Okay.
But I think what you say is, I'm not admitting guilt, but you have way too much evidence that is pointing my way that I think a jury would be like, oh my goodness. So I'm going to take a lesser sentence by pleading this Alfred plea, even though I do not admit guilt. You live to hopefully, 3 years from now, the technology or someone finally comes forward and says, I did it.
Yep. Yes. So if you're not familiar with the West Memphis 3 case, that's Damian Eccles. And 3 young teenagers that were accused of killing 3 boys, and yeah, they were going after them, and he spent years
Yep.
and years in prison until he finally got out.
Yeah.
And now he fights for people like that.
So
I didn't see this going there. Wow, that took me back for a minute.
Well, I still want to talk about the, alternative suspects. So we have a list here of folks that you believe are good potential alternative suspects.
Yes.
I'm not in that camp. So why don't you run through your list? Maybe give a reason why you think they're a good alternative suspect. I also know you have a video that you want to show probably at the end of some unknown person. Maybe we
have
could
a couple of videos
okay.
we're going to insert. Yes.
So let me turn this over to you, and I will do some active listening and some very good nodding and things like that. And let's hear what you have
everybody,
to say.
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See if you can write down your 6 and see if they match.
All right.
So a couple members of the frats, and these are all people I got this list from that I hear discussed, like speculated about because of suspicious activity or some of those items on our suspect list that could potentially match. Someone from the frats, because there supposedly was a fight that night. A lot of people think the fight involved Ethan and Xana. There's also a couple people that have maybe a motive of maybe really bad embarrassment or infatuation or things like that. So some motives that are out there with that would give someone a reason to be angry or get revenge type thing. So that's one. There's a neighbor, and then the person. So a neighbor who lived in a little house near the crime scene that lived with his sister and had a dog. And so this person had connection with Kaylee because of the dog. I also think his sister knew the girls, so there's some connection there. I've heard them talked about. I think there's some military experience there. So with weapons and things like that. And I get that person in that house confused with, they did have another suspect, I guess, early on. And that person's DNA could not be ruled out underneath Maddie's fingernails. So this would be person number 3. And I also thought I heard he lived close by. So I get the Cole guy that is mentioned in one of the court documents. I get him confused with the Moys and where they lived. So if you know that, put that in the chat. But those are two more. So that's 3.
All right. Let me help clarify because some of this is new to me. So the frats, there was a fight and spontaneously this crime took place is one of the theories.
Could have been planned out.
Even before the fight?
No, like if there was other fights, other incidences. Yeah, but there was a fight that night. So yeah, that would be more spontaneous. And they did say it was planned. So it might not be the best.
No, I'm just because I'm trying to take your list and apply it here. And the neighbor with the dog, the Moys, what's the motive?
Just like you're saying, I don't know, internal.
Oh, probably, hey, I want to kill
infatuation.
Somebody. Okay.
Jealousy. I don't know.
But nothing
what
that
everybody on mainstream media says.
Nothing that the community is saying, they had beef or your dog bit my dog. Or...
I don't think so. If I'm missing that, let us know.
But just maybe, hey, I got bad thoughts in my head and bad feelings in my gut and opportunity. It met my urge and boom, there I did it.
Maybe.
Okay.
And then the other guy that they named in the document, I was like, who is that? And where did they come from? Another one of those, just like with Bryan Kohberger, when they said his name, who is that? Where did he come from? I did hear people speculating that maybe because they did take DNA off of a cigarette butt. So if that was maybe him, and then because they would have to have that DNA, right, to look for it under her fingernails and then say, well, it can't be determined. So you can't say either way. They couldn't say excluded. They couldn't say included, I believe is how that went. So I believe he was considered a suspect early on, and I'm not sure of his. That's why I think he also lived nearby, because I don't know what else the connection was, unless if he worked in. I said unless if.
Unless if he. She
I
can
have
take
my own language, you
She
guys.
could take 4 words and turn them into one.
So unless he was a person that worked in town in like one of the restaurants or something like that. So I have some confusion there with him. Have not done a deep dive on him yet.
Okay. Who else you got?
So the ex-boyfriend, the first Jack D. I really don't think he is a suspect. I believe the parents of Kaylee went, because they're defending him, and they checked him out the day after, and I don't know. I don't think he has a good alibi. I think his alibi is just that he was sleeping, but I also don't know what his motive would be. So,
okay.
We're going to talk about our opinions after I go through this list, but just throwing that in there. All right, the hoodie guy that we've seen in the grub truck video. That's the other Jack.
The guy.
This was
the guy early on.
He even looked like he had a weapon in his pocket when he was at the grub truck.
Oh man, I can't tell you how many times I watched that video and different, close-ups and everything with this Jack guy. All right.
So why everybody thought he would be a suspect? Nobody could understand why he was with them. He looked like he was watching them. It was weird, like almost like that stalkerish behavior. The girls seemed to have blown him off. So that's not a warm, fuzzy, didn't seem like a warm, fuzzy relationship. They like ditched him on camera. You can see that. Apparently, all these kids were like at parties, dances, events where there would be drinking going on all day. Then at the bars at night, this person, this Jack included, and it was almost 2 a.m. when we saw them on video. And supposedly, I don't know why we think this, but this is what's been said the whole time, is that he got in his car and drove like 5 hours to his parents' hunting cabin or cabin that they have. So I would think that the police would have verified that, probably be at a gas station, be caught on cameras and stuff like that. So he also was a hunter, though. He was a hunter. He would know how to use a K-bar. I think there were photos of him and his deer that he got. All right. My favorite person of all in this case we're going to get to our opinions, but there was another neighbor, Enon, and this is where I'm going to insert a video in a few minutes because we've brought him up in so many episodes, and I kept saying I want to do a whole episode just on him, just because he's I call him Spicoli. He's like that kind of a character, but he did live near the girls, close enough to be able to like see them when they were outside, like hanging out, having gatherings. Talked about going over there to meet them one time. And I think it was funny because he talked about bringing them like a already opened bottle of wine. I don't know if it was like because he's a chef, like a cooking wine or something. And he was called to testify. And this is from him. He spoke on some different channels. When they thought there was going to be a preliminary hearing, he was going to be a witness. but then that never happened and he's never brought up again. He juggles fire and swords and things like that. And he got home late that night. So I don't know. He has proximity. I don't know if he has a motive, but he is someone who also seemed to have inserted himself a little bit. So that would be why I would put him.
Which could be a behavior of somebody who's guilty of a crime,
So I'm going to show a clip of Enon so you'll know who I'm talking about.
You want to come play with my cat? I don't know, like 1:30, 2-ish a.m. Was maybe when I got home, maybe I'm always like kind of hoping that I have like a parking spot right in front of my door when I get there, because like lots of times on campus, there's like parties and like they're pretty full. And so like this time I noticed that like, I don't know, it wasn't really any cars as usual. I was like, cool, I'm gonna get a nice spot right in front. And there was I saw like this sort of like kind of like decked out like luxury, like I thought it was black SUV, maybe like a Beamer or something, and it had like rims, tinted windows, and I was like, oh, that's like a pretty cool car. And then like coming out, like I noticed some like plates from like Arizona, I want to say, or Montana. There's kind of like it's like I'm always like kind of curious what kind of like different plates are like around. And you want to come play with my cat?
Okay, that was the clip of Enon and my last suspect that I have. There's two guys caught on video on the 1320 Linda Lane camera. So I want to show you that. Okay, this is the dumpster video that is at 1320 Linda Lane. And I believe all this Linda Lane footage is mentioned in the court documents that they're going to be using. So who's a better suspect than someone caught on camera? This is at 3:15 in the morning. There's a guy walking up to the dumpster. I can't tell if he's holding like his phone light or if it's just a cigarette. He digs around in the dumpster for a minute. He's rounding the corner. He came from the end of the road, just walking up. And now he's walking in the direction towards the house at 3:15 in the morning. So I think that's compelling evidence. Okay, there's going to be a guy that comes out. You'll see the light from the right side of the screen. So from a wooded area, and we were talking about how somebody would have to change their clothes, right? You might do that going towards a wooded area. I thought maybe he had a backpack on, but I can't really tell. I don't think this is the same guy from 3:15. What do you think? Think it looks like the same guy?
I don't know. What time is it?
It is now 5 in the morning. It's 4:59 in the morning. So he comes out of that little wooded area, standing next to the same dumpster. So like this meeting spot, right? And he's waiting for a car to come pick him up. So it looks like he's on his phone, probably texting the person, hey, I'm out here. So in a minute, you'll see the car come up. And I know it's black and white, so it's hard to tell colors of cars, but.
Where is the house at in conjunction to this?
I have the hardest time with this area.
Well, I'm going to assume it's
definitely to the left. I think like a street away, like a block, like not a block. I don't know how to describe it. I think when you round that corner, because this is a Linda Lane photo. So on the other camera, it's like that long parking lot. So I think maybe through that parking lot and then across a street. So like a couple minute walk.
It's kind of a reach.
Why?
That leaving this area and going off camera, which is 15 feet from the dumpster, that person could have went in many different directions.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. For sure. You would need other evidence to go along with it. But if I'm going to commit a crime, I'm not going to meet up and get picked up and do all of that right in front of the house. I'm going to get away from the house as fast as I can. I wouldn't be standing out there he's out there for a good 2 minutes, minute and a half, waiting for someone to pick him up. I'm not going to do that right out in front of the house.
Looks like the car's coming
So
there.
here comes the car. He says that's it. And he did put a bag in the car. He did have a backpack.
Mm. Did they sit there a while? Oh, no, they're gone. Okay.
And there they go at 5:02. The guy came out of the woods at 4:59, so 3 minutes.
And you say the woods, but this camera, is it posted to a tree in the woods? Or
I'm assuming there's a house there, some kind of building. I shouldn't be saying a wooded area, I think is what I said. Like what you can see those trees over there that like straight ahead. There's Idaho is kind of this is the city, but they still leave like by the house, how there's that wooded area behind the house. I'm thinking of something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't make fun of me.
I'm not. You just said from the woods, and I'm like, why is there a camera on a tree in a wood?
Right.
I mean, who knows if this is a dwelling? Could they have come out of the side door of the dwelling? I mean, why does it have to be the woods?
Could be, but
okay.
Just because Bryan drives a white car and they claim that there's white cars driving, you're using the same logic with these guys. But to me, I'm like, well, but it's okay to use that logic with Bryan. Because he pinged off the tower.
I will take all of that sarcasm and let it drape over me.
I'll cut that. All right. So that was my list of suspects that I came up with. You can let us know in the comments if there's anyone we're missing that you have on your radar. And these are things that are people that I'm thinking the defense might be able to find evidence, because that's what they're looking for, is evidence, connections to the victims in this case. So in those two clips, the guy walking up to the dumpster at 3:15, and then the guy getting picked up at 5 a.m, I think those are the suspects that would be connected to the drug ring that I've been talking about forever.
That's interesting, because I was about to ask you, all these people that you listed for a year and a half now, you've been talking about drug cartel, how the families were connected. So maybe in the last segment, we give our opinion. I'm going to assume this is probably going to be.
That's where we're at.
Okay. Yeah. I'm assuming this is going to be your number one from that list, because we have talked off camera, a little bit on camera, a lot about the drugs, and I want your opinion to be your opinion, but I may have some questions about that when we get to that point. So would you like to go first and give your opinion?
Yeah. Okay. I have no idea who those people are. Like you said, they could just be getting picked up for a ride to church. I don't know. I think it was a Sunday morning, right? However, it's suspicious to walk up to a garbage dumpster at 3:15 in the morning, the night that a quadruple homicide happens, and you rummage through a dumpster when they're saying the crime happened originally between 3 and 4, and then from 4 to 4:20. Okay. And then, a couple hours later at 5 a.m., someone's getting picked up saying it's done. But I don't know who they are. So, can't say. But I would think their phones should be, could you identify, because now you know times and location. So trying to find out something from their phones, identifying them that way would be huge. Or asking people, or I know there is a YouTuber who has gone through all the connections from the two parents of the victims that have been in trouble with that. And someone could have ratted on somebody, told on somebody, somebody's mad because of something. And it could be a planned out retaliation.
I see.
That's my number one theory. I wanted to back up when you said I'm a Kohberger, but that has now taken on kind of a new term. And I don't know if that is more like you're defending him no matter what, like defending Bryan no matter what. And I don't feel like that. I'm not going to defend him if I see evidence that shows he's the perpetrator. I've just always looked at it as I just don't see the evidence to say that he's the one. I just don't think 100% that he's the one. If they prove it and change my mind and I see evidence, then I'm not going to be mad. I'm not just defending him. I'm not that way.
And I think that with everybody, even these alternative suspects, if not Bryan, then who? Nobody has come even close to the evidence that they have against Bryan Kohberger. And the Bryan Kohberger evidence, I'll give the community 100% credit. It's weak. So throwing anybody else in the mix, it's going to be minuscule. It's going to be weaker than weak.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this. So there is someone on the other Linda Lane video that is connected to the drug ring that has a pretty unique last name. It's not Smith or Johnson or that a lot of people would have. You can hear people yell it out clearly. So if that person is in the area on the night of the crime and is proven to be there through videos, phones, things like that, once you identify these people, you could then look at that blood that was on the railing in the house, the knife sheath, the mattress, the door handles, and compare their DNA. You could look for connections and start asking people, about it and get witnesses. So I think there could be more solid evidence on that route. Could be. Not that there is, but could be. So.
Yes, I agree.
That's my opinion.
No, I think I've said on previous episodes, if there was one that I probably could get behind, was this one. Maybe because you've been talking to me about it for a year and a half.
It's just the only thing that's made sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, none of these other ones really, I think they're intriguing. I think there's some serendipitous things that happen that put the frat boys, in in the spotlight, or Enon's
oddities
an interview with News Nation or whatever, that everyone's like, man, who's this guy? So I get it. I get where some of these are coming from, but the only thing that's ever really captured my attention for any particular time is Jack S.,
the hoodie guy,
because that narrative at the beginning was just, oh my gosh, poor dude. He must have had to go into witness protection. I'm telling you, it was an
bad.
Onslaught.
It was bad. And if he's just this innocent person, oh my goodness, it was bad.
Yeah, it was really bad. And I felt for him. I was like, wow, and I wasn't, overly engaged in realizing what was happening. I thought people were trying to solve the crime in the beginning, and then it turned into you got the wrong guy, which I think when people were trying to solve the crime, I was like, whoa, take it easy on that dude, man. That's a lot of speculation for a grub truck video. Then when it turned into they got the wrong guy, I think that's when I kind of separated a little bit. I think you and I were like, on, looking at it through two different lenses a little bit. But the one lens that I did listen to a lot was the drug dealer theory, because if there's anything that is going to cause corruption, right, it's love, money, and drugs. Are probably the three things,
and that's money.
Yeah,
right?
and drugs.
You messed with someone's money, though,
Yep.
right? You messed with someone's money, and they are mad. That's the way I look at it.
No, for sure. I think there's, now I would need a lot more stuff to go along with the theory,
right?
Because I've heard an interesting theory. So bring me something that starts connecting some of the mid-level to low-level players in this conspiracy to connect them.
I don't think it was ever looked at that way. And so that's, to me, that's why having Bryan Kohberger, if it's him, I just need to see more solid evidence. It's just been kind of things, right? Not having DNA, but on something that can be explained away because it's a movable object. A white car, but probably the wrong year. Potentially bought a K-bar, but we don't have a receipt. He just clicked on some things. Everything's just a little bit like just not solid, not concrete, in my opinion, from what I have seen so far listed in the court documents. So I know you say all those little things like add up, but exclude. I just feel like, what if they could have looked at other people with a more solid motive and possibly more solid evidence, but they never looked. I don't know. They didn't test. And we know there's two or three unknown male DNAs. They're on gloves. They're on the railing. So maybe they could be theirs. They never found out who that belongs to. So there's enough there for the defense to go fishing and investigating that stuff.
And I think the judge was like, look, I'm going to give you some rod and reel to fish, but it's not going to be
right.
You have to have somebody come to the witness stand and place suspicion on an alternative suspect. You cannot just say, oh, I think Jack S did. I think Jack D did. I think Enon did. I think the neighbor with the dog did it. I think the drug cartel.
Yeah, they cannot do that.
Yeah,
they cannot come with, a whole bunch of options.
Right.
It needs to be something that they're really trying to prove a suspect, like the prosecution did with.
Right.
Now, let me ask you this, because I've heard other people say this. I've heard people say that if there are cases where, they're taking Bryan to court and he does not get found guilty, that those cases don't get solved. Then they don't get solved.
I don't see any convictable evidence for somebody else. There's nothing. If there was DNA on a glove, just a random glove outside the house, that doesn't make me convict.
I'm just thinking if he's found not guilty, the jury's going to have, no, and I'm not talking about for a technicality. I'm not talking for a technicality. I'm like, the jury says you didn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt.
Correct.
Why do all these cases like kind of get dropped or go cold? Like, why don't they?
I know you get mad at me every time I say this, but Who are you going to try for Nicole Brown Simpson's murder?
The son.
Even though OJ had cut on his finger, his blood,
right.
his blood at the scene, his blood in his Bronco.
That's a good example.
All the evidence pointing to him, he's found
innocent. Like Casey Anthony too, right? That's another case.
Who are you going to try for it?
Yeah. I don't know if this is a good way to wrap this up or not, but I thought it was interesting. I wanted to ask that question because I don't know. It just seems like nobody wants somebody guilty to get off. That's horrible.
My opinion, if you're asking, of the alternate suspect is there is none. But I will tell you, and the only reason I say there is none is because there isn't any supporting evidence that has been brought forward by the prosecution or yet the defense, but they have an opportunity to bring something forward that is compelling enough to say, okay, I can seriously take my eyes off of the person sitting here in front of me and all this evidence and start shifting them somewhere else. I've heard nothing from the defense that says completely take your eyes off our client and look here, because you are missing the boat on this one.
Not yet. It did just come out that they do have an expert that's going to testify that Ethan and Xana were attacked at the same time and looked like multiple weapons. So I also think you need the medical examiner's report to go with that. So I'm sure they're going to rely on that too. But after you citing those other cases now, though, I'm thinking this makes it more crucial and critical for the defense to do it now. Like, you don't wait, you do it during trial and try to get that during trial, or you're toast. Oh my goodness. Well, and I'm sure, like I told you before, like Cy Ray's very focused on catching bad guys. Nobody's going to want someone who really did do it to just walk away and get away with it. If he's not the guy, you and I are both like innocent until proven guilty. Even you have been pretty open-minded about that when discussing this. You just happen to think they have the right guy, and I think I don't think they do. But
I try to sit in the jury's chair, and so far in this jury chair, outside of the courtroom, all the evidence that has been presented as a juror, I'm leaning towards Kohberger. Now, when I'm in the jury box and all that minutia is filtered out, and I get what is legally allowed to be presented to the jury in, this type of setting, I would make that decision based on that information.
Sure. So all we know right now in these new court documents is that the defense is now going to attempt to show an alternative suspect theory. Can't be my client. It's these other alternate suspects.
Yep.
So we just speculated on who do we think based on all the online sleuthing and information that has been out there also that it could be. So we'll have to wait and see what comes out.
Yeah. And I guess one last thing that I'll say about this is I think there's enough little pieces for each thing that you mentioned, and even Dylan and, some of the family members and things like that, that I think it's incumbent upon the prosecution to dispel some of those things, right? Like that video that you showed with the two people, the guy coming out the woods. I think someone needs to flip the camera around and say, this is where the guy came from. This is who picked him up. And this is where they were going, because we saw this video and we didn't have Bryan Kohberger at the time. We had to look at what these two dudes were doing. I know who that dude is. I know who this dude is. and this is what happened.
They did have this footage, and just another fact about that, there's a chunk of time from all those videos. There's like, I don't know, 6 hours of video on that camera, and there's a chunk of time that's missing. It's like a 20-minute chunk of time, and it would be the time where they're saying Bryan's car is doing something, so you would need that to prove it. And they don't have, is it because it's not on there? That's what it looks like. It looks like because it's not on there. It's gone.
Yeah,
like nobody, and it's, I think that's kind of weird, because I know once this video footage, it was released online, everybody like downloaded it and saved it. I mean, I didn't, I was late to the game on that, but I'm like, nobody has that. Nobody has that time, unless if it's always been missing. I don't know. We still have 5 more topics.
Yes.
That we want to talk about. And we are releasing these videos as premieres so that we can chat with you. We have started to drop memberships. So if you join us, maybe you'll be lucky to get a membership. We do have a good time doing that. And please subscribe if you haven't. We do have a lot of new viewers that are just finding us for the first time. So welcome if you're new, and make sure you hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. And we will see you next time. Bye.